Welcome to the fourth module in the Surviving and Thriving as a New Leader series. We hope that since the last module, you've worked to find ways to build feedback into conversations on a regular basis and have had some valuable conversations with team members and colleagues about expectations and recognition. In this module, we're going to dig into some things that are hard for many of us: communication, conflict, and difficult conversations. We'll look at what it means to be a collaborative communicator and share tips for becoming a better listener, keeping conflict constructive, and having difficult conversations. Just like in the last module, you'll hear from other leaders and providers who will share their perspectives on these topics. And we'll leave you with a few things to explore and pay attention to between now and the next module. And we have a special treat for you. Joanne Preston is the Senior Manager of Workforce and Organizational Development with the Rural Wisconsin Health Cooperative, and she has graciously agreed to share her knowledge on many of the topics covered in this module. We're excited to have Joanne's expertise represented in this series and know you'll learn a lot from her. So I'll get us started by introducing a few ideas and then turn things over to Joanne. So let's get started. The innovation needed to address the complex challenges within our healthcare system can only come from people with many different perspectives working together. Such challenges can't be solved by just one person, organization, or area of expertise. Collaboration is key. Leaders who take a collaborative approach to communication excel at connecting with others in ways that encourage the free sharing of ideas and knowledge. They do things like show appreciation for the experience and knowledge of others, remain open to new possibilities, stay focused on common goals and help others do the same, and share information openly. Collaborative communicators have two key skills. They're able to adapt their communication to the audience, and they know how to really listen to others.
When you're communicating as a leader, I think you have to pause more before you open your mouth or even react with your body language, because people can construe it in different ways. Whereas an individual contributor, or like a fellow employee, like they might mouth off sometimes or like show frustration with something that's happened with big sighs or a roll of their eyes. But as a leader, when you set the tone and I would call it almost setting the thermostat for the workplace, you can't let other people control the temperature. Like, you have to keep more of a steady pace, a steady temperature, no matter what is happening around you, whether there's like fire or just major frustration with employee conflict, or in our case, like a patient issue or something. You have to keep the temperature at a certain level so that everyone can be heard and know what's going on.
Adapting communication means that you consider the other person's perspective when delivering a message. You tap into what's important to them in terms of things like their understanding of the topic at hand, their own goals and priorities, their leadership or conversational style. For example, imagine that you're an accounting manager in a rural hospital and you're communicating with your team about upcoming changes to the employee expense reporting process. You have one employee who you know will take the change in stride and prefers not to get into the details when communicating. So you make sure they understand the reason for the change, share highlights of the new process, and ask if they have any questions. You have another employee who is slower to adjust to changes and does prefer detailed explanations, so you decide to set aside a good amount of time to have the conversation and share details about the new process, and let them know that you're there to support them through the transition. Adapting your approach in this way creates an environment that promotes mutual understanding and respect, a key element in a collaborative relationship.
Well, first of all, I can tell you there's no magic wand. How I wish. Some people have an easier time understanding than others, and you can't just do it one time. I don't just talk to them one time and say, that's it. I've told you everything. I've given you all the information. It's like eating an elephant. You just kind of take a bite at a time. You go over this part, you go over that part, you re-emphasize this part, you continue to discuss things, and I mean often. because you're talking about the big changes. We've had so many little changes here. When I came, there was just no cohesion. I did not see the cohesion that I felt should have been here. So until you work through some of the internal issues, you can't bring that sort of stuff in. So it took a while to work through some of the needs that were here, because when I'm saying, this is the trend that we need to do, this is the standard in relation to population health, blah, blah, blah. They don't want to hear that when they don't have a decent stretcher, or they don't have crash cart that works properly. They don't have equipment that they need to take care of patients. So you have to start on the inside before you really bring all of that from the outside. And it's just a matter of being able to kind of balance that. Once you get your inside to a point where you say, okay, the processes are better, we have what we need, then this is what we can do to enhance what we have. So that's the way I've done it in relation to looking at all of the stuff that's coming down the pike from, the feds and CMS and CDC and population health and all that.
In order to collaborate with others, you must truly understand the other party's needs and priorities. We can't assume we know what these are. We have to hear it directly from them. And the only way we can really hear it is to use active listening. When we actively listen, we pay attention to another person's message with the intent of truly understanding their perspective, rather than listening just long enough for us to start formulating our response. Here are some things you can do to really tune in to what another person is saying. Remove distractions as much as possible. This includes putting away your phone and avoiding looking at your computer. Intentionally focus on the other person's message. Clarify the other person's message by asking open-ended questions like, when did that happen? Or how do you know that? Rephrase or summarize the message using your own words. So it sounds like what happened was. And lastly, reflect the other person's feelings back to them. You sound frustrated. For more information about active listening, see the resource guide for this series.
So often when it comes to conflict, we think about how hard it is to have those conversations, and we worry a lot about what we're going to say to someone. But in truth, as you've just been hearing about the skill of listening, listening is the most important skill that we need to develop when it comes to resolving conflict and preventing it as well. However, that said, it's true that we need to think about what we say and how we say it. The fact is, when it comes to resolving conflict, there are two costs that we need to consider. One is the cost of speaking up. And this is one where we go to readily, where we worry about what I'm going to say and what's that person going to think of me, and will they be upset with me? Will they retaliate? Will they think I don't care about them if I speak up about something? So we have no lack of imagination about some of the worries that we have about speaking up. The cost, however, can be higher when it comes to the cost of not speaking up. And I encourage you to think about, what are the costs when you don't say what needs to be said? In healthcare, we know that patients suffer when we don't speak up about things that we see. Maybe you have two providers working together and one is afraid to say something to the other about a mistake or something that was missed. So we hesitate and we don't speak into that, and patients suffer. Quality suffers. From a leadership point of view, when you have employees who are not resolving conflict, or you're not resolving conflict with them, what results in the absence of those clear, direct conversations is drama. And the workplace drama is what causes relationships to go sour, and people leave. People don't stay in places and in jobs where there's not good, open conversation and honest, trust-building conflict resolution. These conversations to resolve conflict are not easy, and I encourage you to think about the fact they may never be so. They likely won't be ever easy or comfortable. So that's not what we're going after here. So think about getting more skilled and ready to have them and bringing that courage to that conversation.
So I think many times conflict is just a misunderstanding of each person's role and each person's goal. So when it comes to the provider interacting with the leadership or the administrators, what we see a lot is that we're not working towards the same goal, because my goal is obviously patient-centered. I want my patients to be healthy. I want my patients to be happy. I want their needs to be met. And many times administration wants to make sure that the bottom line is met. They want to make sure that a goal is met, that, is financial, or that is patient numbered, like, we have a minimum patient baseline of 20 patients per day. And so if administration and providers don't work together to collaborate on goals, that is going to be an automatic kind of rebuff. Because if you came at me as a provider and told me, you're not meeting the mark, you're not seeing enough patients, I, as a provider, might go, well, you know what? I might have only seen 17 patients the last 3 days in a row, but all 17 of them were a 99214 visit, and they had multiple chronic conditions and referrals that needed to be completed, as well as, colonoscopies and mammograms to review. And you might not know the specificity and the difficulty of caring for that patient as an administrator, because it might not be something that you understand from the collaborative effort of the provider. And so if we work together and we sit down and go, hey, my goal is to make sure that I order a colonoscopy on every one of my patients that it's due on this year. And you tell me your goal is that I want you to meet the quality care measures for, Aetna Insurance or Blue Cross Blue Shield or whatever, so we can get a cost savings payment at the end of the year. Well, hey, you know what? If I do all my colonoscopies, that's going to get you your cost savings. And so then we're working together towards a common goal. And that's going to be the most helpful thing when it comes to conflict and conflict resolution between your provider and your administrative staff.
Organizations where trust is built and conflict conversations can be had skillfully are organizations where people get results, where it's safe to speak up about a concern, where you have stronger commitment based on that trust and that open conversation that you're having with your colleagues, because you've been able to disagree and have it out essentially in a way that it can be heard in a respectful way. Interpersonally, when it comes to conflict, you may think as a new manager that it can be very hard to have these conversations. It takes courage. It takes the willingness to step into something that's hard. And one of the first things that you have to do as a leader is speak up for what you need. I think about an orange. If you have an orange sitting out in front of you and you have two people who want the orange, what's the thing that you do to resolve that conflict? Well, it seems natural. A lot of people will say you just cut it in half. But the truth is you have one person who's hungry and wants to eat the orange, and you have the other person who wants to bake a cake and needs the rind. So if you cut it in half, what you have is two people who don't get what they need. So when we learn to speak out about what we need, very often we can prevent conflict, which ideally that's what we want to do. And we do that by first speaking up about the things that we need and want. And in your manager role, encouraging other people to do that as well. And it's not always easy for people to do that. It takes assertiveness and courage, but it's the kind of thing that we really want to strive for, and you lead by example. Very often managers will say to me, how do I get my employees to have less conflict with each other? The first thing you do is get better at it yourself. One key question to ask yourself as a leader is, what is it that I want and need to see now that I'm not seeing or that's not happening right now? Once you've identified that, you have clarified your needs and can go forward from there. Once we identify that the cost of speaking up is worth it, that there's something on the other side where people will actually get what they need, we need to make a commitment to something that I call zero tolerance for triangulation. So you'll see the triangle, and essentially what you see is a 3 pronged communication style that happens so often in organizational life and is so destructive. It's the triangulation of our communication, where A goes to B about C. And A is the persecutor. A is the one who's talking out of turn about someone who's not there. B is the savior. And keep a note, this is a tricky spot for managers to be in because you feel like you're listening and you're being the one that someone can go to. But if you're listening outside of the dyad, you're contributing to the problem. So A goes to B, the persecutor goes to the savior, instead of going to the person in the other prong of that triangle is the victim, the person who's not there to defend themselves. So what we're really trying to go after is send A to C. If A has a concern with C, that's who they talk to. And be very careful as a manager or as a leader or as a friend. Don't put yourself in between two other people and get involved in triangulation. A couple of great phrases to think about when you're looking to eliminate triangulation from your vocabulary and from your department is to think of the phrase, what you permit, you promote. And if you tolerate it, you accept it. So what does that mean? Essentially, you can't just walk a big circle around triangulation conversations. It's important to address it, even with something as simple as, I'm not comfortable having this conversation without that person here who's involved. Let's get everybody together. Or I know I used to talk about that person behind their back before I was a manager, but I've really come to understand that that's not okay. Let's not do that. That destroys trust. Having the courage to have those conversations will really help you prevent a lot of conversations that result in conflict.
I think some of the tricks I've found in having difficult conversations is, one, they're unavoidable. Like, you have to have it, otherwise the tension is going to build and become toxic for everyone involved. So just like knowing that and going into like, I can't skirt around this is helpful. I think also having someone to vent to if you need. So our clinic's HR department is off site. We contract out, and I have a good relationship with our HR person. So I have the opportunity to call and kind of vent about something so that when I go into resolution with an employee, I don't have all that pent up anger. And not taking it too personally, I think, is also a good tip. It's something that I struggle with, but it's also just part of the game of leadership. Like, you can't be everybody's best friend, but you also don't want to be everybody's worst enemy. So finding that middle ground and being happy with it.
Conflict approaches really kind of boil down into two buckets. We have folks who are more wired to address the relationship aspect of conflict, and folks who are more wired to address the agenda. So the feelings or the facts, emotion or logic, much like our personality styles or our negotiation styles, our conflict approach styles follow along these same lines in a whole continuum. So there's some great tools in the resources that can allow you to do a test questionnaire to find out what your conflict style is. But essentially what we want to be able to do is build our toolbox. So sometimes conflict resolution requires a very direct approach. You know, your kid's running out into the street, you don't say, okay, let's talk about that. You say, no, out of the street now. You're very direct and very to the point. Sometimes, if we over-rely on that type of style in conflict resolution, we have people who will run far away from us and we won't get to build those relationships of trust. So we really need to be able to know, when do I need to focus on the agenda? When do I need to focus on the relationship? And be able to stay aware of that and balance that out. As it relates to the agenda and relationship styles, one way to question yourself quickly is, am I the kind of person who tends to speak out and then later say, oh, I shouldn't have probably said that? Or am I the kind of person who tends to hold back and later wish I would have said something? You know who you are. And what we need to be able to do is know that there are times we just need to step into it. Don't wait for it to be perfect. And if you're the kind of person who tends to jump in too quickly, know that you just need to pause, take a breath, and think about what you want to say first. So staying self-aware is critical with conflict, just like any other leadership skill. So as you think about the kinds of conflicts that may come to you, there are several tips that can really help you as you prepare, which is the first tip on the screen that you will see. Prepare. Sit down, write down what you want to say before you say it. Get yourself in the right mindset. And what I mean by that is, very often in conflict we think winner, loser, right or wrong. And we all like to be right, but we have to get out of that mindset of being right before we go in. Our mindset needs to be on a higher purpose. If it's with you and your employees or with a colleague, our mindset needs to be, what is my intention for this conversation? And my intention could be, I want this person to be successful. I want us to have a good working relationship. I want us to have a good outcome from this conversation. Not, I want them to see things my way, because that's a no-win situation in the end. So prepare. Be intentional with your intention. Again, it's, I want my intention to be something that's focused on what is a good outcome of this discussion. Not right or wrong, not getting it perfect, not having all the exact right words, and also not taking all of the oxygen, making sure that I listen to what the other person has to say. So have that intention walking in and have that written down in your preparation. That's really helpful. The third tip for you is be specific. Don't use judgment words. We use judgment words all the time. Good, bad, disorganized, poor attitude, not a team player. Those are words that are very vague when it comes right down to it. So when you're having a conflict conversation or a coaching conversation with your employees for that matter, it really helps to be specific. I noticed that you were 10 minutes late 3 times last week. I noticed when you came to the meeting the last couple of times, you didn't have your project work done, so it delayed our team from getting forward. I noticed that when you walk through the hall, we have a policy that says that we say good morning to people and we say hello, we greet. And I noticed that you don't do that consistently. In fact, I just noticed it in the hall a minute ago. So being very specific and clear with behaviors, not judgments, because you can always argue a judgment. Behavior is something that I own, that I saw, or that I observed or heard or sensed in some kind of way. The next bullet is identify what you both want. And we think of this as mutual purpose. So before you sit down with someone, again, in that preparation phase, you want to think about what is it that we both want. We both want to be able to get out of work on time. We both want quality care for patients. We both want to have this good friendship between us. We both want a trusting work environment. We both want to have a good day. Whatever it is that you can identify that you both want. This mutual purpose is hugely important because it addresses one of our barriers to having conflict conversations, and that's that we're afraid of the other person getting defensive. When someone gets defensive, it's natural, first of all. We all do it. But when that happens, if you have a mutual purpose and things go south in the conversation, you can say, our feelings are getting heightened here. Let's go back to what we both want. We both want to have a good day at work. Let's stay focused on that because we both want that, and let's work to make that happen. Your mutual purpose really drives that back home for you. The next bullet point is to identify what you both want or need to see. So this is really about stating, here's what I would like to see, and what would you like to see? Let's have that dialogue. It's a quality dialogue, both ways. That's what really is the end result, is really listening. Getting back to the beginning of this session is thinking about listening as that skill that's so important. Is I need to say what I have to say and be assertive about that. But part of assertiveness is that it's an equal playing field. And so we're both listening to each other. So let's walk through an example. of a conflict. You have two coworkers who work together, and one of them has kids and always has to be out of work on time to be able to be home for the school bus. The other coworker doesn't have kids, but she has an exercise class that she likes to go to. But she's feeling like, well, that's not as important as being home for the kids. So she frequently stays later so that the other person can leave, and is starting to feel resentful about that. So what we need to do if we're going to have this conversation is the person who wants to go to our exercise class needs to sit down and say, hey, I know that we both just really want to work well together, and I appreciate our work relationship, and I know that we both would just like to really get out of here on time. And stating the feeling. I'm feeling a little frustrated, and then the behavior. When often, in fact, last week 3 times, I ended up staying after the shift was done to get the work completed when I knew that you had to be home for the kids. And what I would like, stating what you want, what I would like is for us both to be able to leave here on time and work out something so that we're at least having it feel more equal. Either solve this problem of not getting out of here on time or sort that out so that both of us can get our needs met. And then really restating that mutual purpose, because I think this will help us have a better working relationship. Your kids will be safe, and I'll also feel like I'm able to get my needs met as well. What do you think? So it just kind of walks down that assertiveness way of approaching a conflict resolution. Now, it's not always going to go well. You can't predict what the other person is going to say, but think about this. What part of the conflict does this person own? When you're in a conflict, what part do you own? So what's happened to result in this particular conflict is one person has not spoken up for the things that they need and is building resentment. We know that that happens. So we have to step into that conversation and keep it from going further. As you think about conflict, think about how could you go back and even prevent that from happening to begin with. It starts again with identifying the needs that we have. I invite you to think about learning about conflict resolution as a lifelong journey. It truly is. It's not something you can take one class on and be done, because every time we step into these conversations, we grow. And every time it's difficult, but we get better at it. And once you start to see the positive results that can come from being on the other side, you will see building of trust. You will see an environment where people know that you will tell them what's on your mind and they don't have to guess. And you will have greater commitment with your team because people will learn to trust that you will say what's on your mind in a way that they can hear it. And as a result, you will have more engaged employees and better results in your team. So think of it as a lifelong journey and continue to learn.
Conflict is something that really you can deal with in some form every day. Someone comes in with a complaint. Someone does something that's outside of policy. Someone makes an unnecessary remark that hurts somebody's feelings. So you deal with that, and I see those as opportunities because it's an opportunity for me to learn or for me to teach. I learn a lot, and I have learned to apologize for things I had absolutely nothing to do with. But it is often easy once you start doing that to realize how that just kind of puts a blanket over the situation. They're sitting there screaming and yelling and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And the next thing that comes out of my mouth is, I'm sorry, you feel that way. Let's see what we can do. Let's talk this through. And it just kind of makes them stop and say, oh, okay. Well, let's talk. And so I've dealt with conflict so much, you just learn to have a calm demeanor, to say a prayer before you go in there dealing with them. And, take your time. Don't rush. You don't have to give them an answer right now. You don't have to, if they're saying, well, you this, you that, you don't have to deny.
I have some tips that I would like to leave you with, because one of the things that happens that makes something a conflict is that our emotions are involved. If it's not emotional at all, it's probably not a conflict. It's probably something else. So our fear of our emotions getting out of control is what stops some people from having these conversations. So these tips might help you when you get to that situation. First of all, take a deep breath. One of the things we stop doing when we're nervous or when we're scared or concerned in these situations is that we breathe to just about here. And what we want is to be able to take a nice deep breath. So just do that with me right now. Just take a nice deep breath. Oxygen to the brain is going to make things easier. Another tip for you is have a phrase ready that you know if the other person gets upset or starts pushing some of your buttons, have a phrase ready to say. Something like, what you have to say is really important to me, and I really want to be present for you and listen. Now, that might not be your words, but think of some phrase that will kind of bring you back to the situation and bring you to the present moment. If things really do feel too scary for you, ask for time. We forget that we can say something like, you know what, I need 10 minutes. I need 20 minutes. Or let's meet tomorrow. I want some time to think about this. You don't have to continue a conversation that has started that feels like it is way too uncomfortable or it's starting to get a little bit out of control. Ask for time and have that phrase ready for yourself in a way that you know that you can say it. That's part of the preparation as well, is how will I say this? I'll say, you know, I just need a little bit of time to think about this. Can we regroup in just a little bit? And then negotiate the amount of time that you need to do that. Have a glass of water available. That will keep those of you who tend to say things before you think a pause. So take a drink of water as you're pausing and thinking, how do I want to show up right now? How do I want to be perceived? And am I acting in a way that's getting me there? So have a way, a prop to help you pause. Face the person squarely. Face on, shoulders to shoulders. That's an assertive stance. And it says equal. It says face to face, straight on, not one person standing and one person sitting, where there's a power differential. When we think about communication, it's always about power. And assertiveness means equal power. And that's ideally what you want. No matter your position, whether you're having a conflict with your boss or your employee or a peer, you want to have that on an equal playing field. You might want to have a phrase ready for yourself that you remind yourself of, something you write on the palm of your hand or on a Post-it note where you can see it. Maybe something like, be courageous. That's one of mine that I like to use. Or growth comes from the hard stuff. Or something that reminds you that, yes, this is difficult, but it's worth doing.
The difficult conversations are difficult because they're made difficult. If you're able to go into a situation, take your time. You know, people have a tendency to sit down and they're already on edge and, you know, they've got their fists clenched and their teeth gritted and they're just waiting. But your demeanor, like I've said before, you're in a fishbowl. Everybody looks at you. And if you're in a room of 4 or 5 people, because you've got 2 complaining, you've got a department head and your demeanor will go a long way. So the biggest thing is to be able to go in, to stay calm. If you get to a point where you are uncomfortable, you feel like you've just been beaten to the point where you can't stand it, you can always excuse yourself. Always. So, excuse me just a moment, I'll be right back. Go outside if you have to go and scream. But you'll learn to work through this. And I think, you know, as you deal with these. And I deal with this every day. Conflict, some little conflict occurs every day. Somebody complains about something, somebody does a little something. So when you say conflict or difficult issues, they are going to be there. You cannot get around them. You can't get over them. You can't get under them. You're going to hit them smack in the face. And when you do, you have to be able to deal with them. It gets easier as you deal with it. I promise it gets easier. It doesn't seem like it right now because you're new and everybody's coming at you with everything at the same time. You learn to compartmentalize everything, prioritize everything, and then deal with everything. And once you can do that, once you can work through that, and your method of thinking kind of just starts to flow automatically in that way, you're going to do great. You'll do great. Starting out scared is a standard. If you're scared and you're a leader, then you're in the right position. Because it's the people that go into the position thinking they know everything. I'm going to be able to deal with this. You can't tell me anything. Those are the ones to be scared of. But if you're afraid that I've got to learn, I know I'm going to make mistakes, then you're going to do just fine.
We've reached the end of this module. In the next module in this series, we'll explore the change process and things you can do as a leader to address the challenges associated with change. Between now and the next module, we encourage you to reflect on these questions on your own or discuss them with your colleagues. How good of a listener are you? When is listening most challenging for you? And what might you do to overcome this challenge? Who would you like to build a more collaborative relationship with? How might you communicate with them in ways that build trust and mutual understanding? What one thing related to conflict would you like to get better at? Would you like to get more comfortable with conflict? Soften your approach? How might you make this happen? The following activities can help you with this. These are some things you might consider doing before you move on to the next module. Identify an upcoming conversation where you'd like to practice your active listening skills. Let the other person know that you're working on these skills and ask them for feedback afterward. Take the conflict styles self-assessment. See the link to this in the resource guide. Share your results with a trusted friend or colleague and ask for their feedback. When have they seen you use your preferred style in beneficial ways? In what situations might it be more helpful to use a different style? And how might you become more comfortable using other styles? Use the difficult conversation planning tool in the resource guide to plan a challenging conversation and then carry it out. Talk to a trusted colleague about their approach to conflict and difficult conversations. How do they approach these types of interactions? For additional information and resources on any of the topics covered in this module, see the resource guide that accompanies this program by searching for Leadership Fundamentals within the Center's resource library. And of course, please feel free to contact us at the Center anytime for additional support. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to continuing the conversation over the next few months.